The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning in March of 1882, and when Marianne Grayson tore it open with trembling fingers, she found nothing inside but a scrap of newspaper and the crushing weight of her own foolishness. She stood in the middle of her father's old ranch house, the wind howling through the gaps in the wooden walls, and read the newspaper clipping for the third time, though the words had already burned themselves into her memory. It was an advertisement for ready-made suits in San Francisco, dated 2 weeks prior. Nothing more. No letter, no explanation, no apology from the man who had promised to marry her, the man who had taken every cent she had saved over 5 back-breaking years of running this failing ranch alone. Marianne crumpled the paper in her fist and let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. $300. That was what her dreams had cost. $300 sent to a man named Richard Thornberry, who had written her such beautiful letters over the past 6 months. Letters full of poetry and promises. Letters that had made her believe someone might actually want to share this hard life with her. She had sent him the money for his train ticket from St. Louis, for new clothes befitting a husband, for the start of their life together. He was supposed to arrive in Dodge City yesterday. The ranch stretched out before her through the grimy window, 20 acres of struggling Kansas prairie that her father had died trying to tame 3 years ago. The barn needed repairs. The fence posts were rotting. The 6 cattle she had left were thin and restless. And now she had no money to fix any of it. No money to buy feed for the coming months. No money to pay the bank note that came due in 8 weeks. She was 23 years old, and she had just gambled away her entire future on a lie. Marianne forced herself to move, to walk outside into the pale morning sunlight that did nothing to warm the cold knot in her stomach. The wind whipped her dark hair across her face as she surveyed the property with new eyes, the eyes of someone who was about to lose everything. Maybe she could sell the cattle now, before they got any thinner. Maybe she could take whatever money that brought and disappear, start over somewhere no one knew her as the foolish woman who fell for a mail-order groom scheme. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn. A rider was approaching from the eastern boundary, moving at an easy pace across the scrubland. As he drew closer, Marianne recognized him as Lucas Dalton, the ranch hand from the massive Cross Creek spread that bordered her property to the north. She had seen him in town a few times, a tall man with sun-weathered features and quiet eyes, but they had never exchanged more than polite nods. He reined in his bay, gelding a respectful distance away, and touched the brim of his hat. His face was all hard angles and shadow beneath the worn Stetson, maybe 30 years old, maybe a bit less. "Morning, Miss Grayson. Sorry to intrude unannounced. Morning." Marianne tried to smooth her expression into something neutral, but she must have failed because concern flickered across his features. "Are you all right? I was riding the fence line and thought I heard something, wanted to make sure there was no trouble." She almost laughed again. Trouble. That was putting it mildly, but pride made her lift her chin. "I am fine, Mr. Dalton. Thank you for your concern." He studied her for a long moment, and something in his gaze made her feel exposed, as if he could see straight through to the panic clawing at her ribs. "Begging your pardon, madam, but you do not look fine. You look like someone just kicked your last leg out from under you." The directness of it caught her off guard. She opened her mouth to protest, to send him away, but what came out instead was the truth. Someone did. Lucas dismounted in one fluid motion and ground-tied his horse. "Maybe you should tell me about it. Why would you care?" The words came out sharper than she intended, but she was so tired of pretending, so tired of trying to manage everything alone. "Because you are my neighbor," he said simply. "Because your fence keeps your cattle off my boss's land, and if you go under, That becomes everyone's problem. And because you look like you might fall over if someone does not at least offer you a place to sit down and a listening ear. Marianne felt something crack inside her chest. She gestured helplessly toward the house. "Would you like some coffee? It is terrible, but it is hot. Terrible coffee is better than no coffee." She led him inside, acutely aware of the shabby state of everything. The dishes stacked in the basin, the cobwebs in the corners, the general air of barely contained collapse. She poured 2 cups from the pot on the stove and handed him one before sinking into one of the 2 remaining chairs at the table. Her father had burned the other 2 for firewood during that last brutal winter before he died. Lucas sat across from her, cradling the cup in work-roughened hands, and waited. The story spilled out of her in a rush. The loneliness after her father's death, the desperate need for help running the ranch, the advertisement she had placed in the St. Louis paper for a husband willing to work the land. Richard Thornberry's response, his eloquent letters, his promises, the money she had sent. The empty envelope this morning when she finished. Lucas was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Do you still have the letters?" "Yes." "Why?" "May I see them?" She retrieved the bundle from her bedroom, tied with a faded blue ribbon that now seemed pathetically romantic. Lucas read through them methodically, his expression growing darker with each page. "This is not the writing of one man," he said finally. "The handwriting changes. See here. And here. I would wager you that whoever ran this scheme had multiple people writing letters to multiple women, all using the same false promises. The confirmation that she had been nothing special, just one mark among many, should have hurt worse. Instead, Marianne felt oddly relieved to have her suspicions validated. "That does not change the fact that I have no money and a banknote coming due." "How much time do you have?" 8 weeks, $73 owed. Lucas set down his coffee cup. "I can help you." "I cannot accept charity." "Not charity. Work." He leaned forward, his gray eyes intent. "You need money. I need a place to stay that is not the Cross Creek bunkhouse. I have been saving to start my own spread, but land prices keep climbing faster than I can save. If you let me stay here, help you fix up the place and get your cattle healthy enough to sell, I will pay you." "That makes no sense. Why would you pay me to do work on my ranch?" "Because I need space to think, to plan. The bunkhouse is loud and crowded and a man cannot hear himself think. You have land, even if you do not have much else right now. You have potential, and you need help whether you want to admit it or not." He paused. "Besides, I have met men like whoever did this to you, taking your money, leaving you high and dry while you lose everything. It sits wrong with me. Let me help you keep your land." Marianne wanted to say no, wanted to cling to her pride, but desperation was a powerful force. "What would you want in return? Besides space to think?" "Nothing. Just meals and a roof." "I will pay you $20 a month for the privilege of staying here and working my own hours. That gives you $40 toward your banknote after 2 months, and if we can sell your cattle at a decent price, you will have the rest." "Why would you do this?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "You do not know me." Lucas stood and carried his cup to the basin. With his back to her, he said, "My mother ran a boarding house in Abilene after my father died. She worked herself to the bone trying to keep it going. When she got sick, none of the people she had helped over the years lifted a finger. She died in debt and the bank took the house. I was 16. I swore then that if I ever had the means to help someone in a similar situation, I would do it. I have the means now, so let me help." The raw honesty in his voice undid her. Marianne felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "I do not know what to say. Say yes, or tell me to leave. But decide now, because your fence is not going to repair itself and those cattle need better grazing." "Yes," she said. Yes, all right, thank you. He turned back to face her, and for the first time she saw him smile. It transformed his entire face, softening the hard edges into something almost gentle. Good. I will bring my things tomorrow. Now show me the property. Let us figure out what needs doing first. They spent the rest of the morning walking the boundaries of her land. Lucas asked questions about water sources, about where the cattle grazed in summer versus winter, about what crops her father had tried to grow. His knowledge was evident in every comment, every suggestion. He pointed out places where the fence could be reinforced more cheaply, areas where the natural drainage could be improved to prevent washouts. As they walked, Marianne found herself relaxing in a way she had not since before her father died. Lucas did not talk down to her or dismiss her opinions. When she mentioned that she had tried to grow wheat on the eastern 5 acres but the soil was wrong, he nodded and said he had seen the same problem on similar land, suggested trying sorghum instead. When she admitted she knew nothing about animal husbandry beyond basic care, he offered to teach her what he knew. "Why have you been working for Cross Creek if you know so much?" she asked as they paused near the sagging barn. "Good pay, good boss, and I needed to learn the business side before I struck out on my own. Benjamin Cross is a fair man, and he has taught me more about running a ranch than I could have learned in 10 years anywhere else. But I am 31 years old, and I want something of my own before I am too old to build it. 31 is not old. Old enough to know what I want. Old enough to be tired of building someone else's dream." He looked at her sideways. "What about you? What made you want to keep this place after your father died?" Marianne ran her hand along the weathered barn wood. "Stubbornness, mostly. This land killed my father, and I refused to let it win. I thought if I could just make it work, it would mean his death was not pointless." She laughed bitterly. "Foolish, I know. Not foolish, human." Lucas pushed open the barn door and surveyed the interior with a critical eye. "This roof needs patching before the spring rains come in earnest. I can do that in a few days. Do you have supplies?" "Some. Not enough." "I will bring more tomorrow." They worked out the details over the next hour. Lucas would move into the small shed that had served as her father's workshop, which had a stove and a cot and enough space for a man's basic needs. He would pay her $20 at the start of each month. In exchange, he would help repair the property, improve the herd, and teach her what she needed to know to keep going after he eventually left to start his own place. When he finally rode off toward Cross Creek as the sun began its descent, Marianne stood in the yard and felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as hope. Lucas arrived the next morning driving a wagon loaded with lumber, tools, nails, and his personal belongings, which fit into a single weathered trunk. He set to work immediately, and Marianne discovered that he was a man of few words but considerable action. While he repaired the barn roof, she worked on clearing out years of accumulated debris from the interior. They fell into an easy rhythm, working separately but somehow together. On the third day, as they took a break for lunch, Marianne asked, "Did you tell your boss why you wanted to move off Cross Creek property?" Lucas took a long drink from his canteen before answering. "I told him the truth, that a neighbor needed help and I had the means to provide it. Benjamin does not object to his men taking side work as long as it does not interfere with ranch business. I still work my regular shifts for him. So you are working 2 jobs now, for a while. I do not need much sleep." The casual way he said it made her chest tighten. "You should not have to do that. I am not doing anything I do not want to do." He unwrapped the sandwich she had made him that morning and took a bite. After a moment he added, "This is good, thank you." Such a simple thing, those words of appreciation, but they warmed her more than the noon sun. She realized with a start that she had grown so accustomed to her own company, to silence and loneliness, that basic human kindness felt like a gift. Over the following weeks, the ranch began to transform. Lucas patched the roof, reinforced the fence, repaired the water pump that had been sputtering for months. He taught Marianne how to properly check cattle for health issues, how to read the weather signs in the sky, how to calculate feed costs against potential sale prices. In the evenings, after he returned from his work at Cross Creek, they would sit on the porch, and he would share stories from his years working ranches across Kansas and Colorado. She learned that he had been born in Tennessee, that his family had moved west after the war when he was just a boy, that he had worked every kind of job imaginable before finding his calling with cattle, that he had been engaged once, years ago, to a woman who decided ranch life was not for her and married a banker in Denver instead. Did it hurt? Marianne asked one evening as the stars began to prick through the darkening sky. When she left, at the time, yes. Now I think we both made the right choice. She would have been miserable, and I would have been miserable watching her be miserable. He stretched his long legs out in front of him. What about you? Was there anyone before Richard Thornberry? She shook her head. My father needed me here. There was never time for courting, and most of the young men in Dodge City wanted wives who knew how to host tea parties, not muck out stables. I always knew I would have to find someone who valued work over social graces. Nothing wrong with a woman who knows her way around a stable, Lucas said quietly. Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. She glanced at him, but his face was shadowed beneath his hat brim. The moment stretched between them, fragile and undefined, until Lucas cleared his throat and stood. I should check on the cattle one more time before dark. After he left, Marianne sat alone on the porch and tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach. She could not afford to develop feelings for Lucas Dalton. He was helping her out of kindness, nothing more. He had his own dreams, his own plans. She would be foolish to mistake gratitude for anything deeper. But as the days turned into weeks, it became harder to maintain that distance. Lucas had a way of noticing things, small things, that caught her off guard. He brought her wildflowers he found while riding the fence line. He fixed the stuck drawer in her bedroom bureau without being asked. He taught her to play poker using dried beans for chips, and his laughter when she beat him 3 hands in a row was the most genuine sound she had ever heard. 6 weeks after he had moved onto her property, they took the cattle to market in Dodge City. Marianne had been dreading this trip, certain that her thin, scraggly herd would fetch pitiful prices. But Lucas had worked near miracles with them, bringing them to better grazing, treating a parasitic infection she had not even known they had, improving their condition dramatically. At the auction, she stood nervously beside him as the bidding started. The first cow went for a decent price, the second for even better. By the time the last one sold, Marianne was gripping Lucas's arm so hard her knuckles were white. Did we really just make $98? She whispered. You did, Lucas corrected. I just helped. With the $20 he had paid her for the first month and the $40 more he insisted on giving her for the second month even though it was not quite due, Marianne now had enough to pay her bank note with money left over. She felt giddy with relief as they walked to the bank, as she counted out the bills and received her stamped receipt proving the debt was satisfied. Outside the bank, she turned to Lucas, and words failed her. He had saved her ranch, saved her life, really, and she had no way to adequately thank him. I do not know what to say, she managed finally. You do not have to say anything. But his eyes were warm as he looked at her, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. Lucas, Miss Grayson. A sharp voice cut through the moment. They both turned to see Sheriff Tom Bradley striding toward them, his face grim. I am glad I found you. There is something you need to know." The sheriff pulled them aside and explained in low tones that he had received a wire from the St. Louis police. They had arrested a ring of con artists running a mail-order-spouse scheme. Multiple women and a few men had been defrauded of thousands of dollars. The ringleader was a man named Charles Webster, who had used dozens of false names, including Richard Thornberry. "They want to know if you will testify," Bradley said. "The trial is in 3 months." Marianne felt Lucas tense beside her. She thought about facing the man who had stolen from her, about standing up in court and admitting her foolishness to a room full of strangers. Then she thought about all the other victims, people who might not have been as fortunate as she was to have help. "Yes," she said firmly, "I will testify." The sheriff nodded approvingly. "Good woman, I will send word." He tipped his hat and departed, leaving Marianne and Lucas standing alone on the street. "That was brave," Lucas said quietly. "It was necessary." She turned to face him fully. "I was lucky, Lucas. Because of you, I did not lose everything, but there are probably people who did. I owe it to them to help put that man in prison." Something shifted in Lucas's expression. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his calloused fingers lingering against her cheek. "You are braver than you think, Marianne Grayson." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent warmth cascading through her. She swayed toward him, and for a heartbeat she thought he might kiss her right there on the main street of Dodge City. But he dropped his hand and stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should head back to the ranch. There is a lot of daylight left." The ride home was quiet, but the air between them felt charged with unspoken things. When they arrived back at the property, Lucas helped her unhitch the wagon, and their hands brushed as they worked. Each touch felt deliberate, weighted with meaning. That night, Marianne could not sleep. She lay in her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about Lucas in his small room across the yard. Thinking about how safe she felt with him near, how his smile made her heart race, how desperately she wanted something she had no right to want. He had said he would stay until she was stable, until the ranch was secure. But that moment had arrived. The banknote was paid. The property was in better shape than it had been in years. He had fulfilled his promise and then some, which meant he would be leaving soon to pursue his own dreams. The thought filled her with a grief so sharp it took her breath away. Over the next 2 weeks, they continued working side by side, but something had changed. She caught him watching her sometimes with an intensity that made her skin flush. Their conversations grew deeper, more personal. He told her about the land he had been eyeing, a parcel about 20 miles north that was coming up for sale. She tried to sound encouraging even as her heart sank. One evening, as they worked together to plant a vegetable garden, Lucas said abruptly, "Come with me." Marianne looked up from the seeds she was pressing into the soil. "What? To St. Louis? For the trial, you should not have to face that alone. Lucas, you have already done so much. I cannot ask. You are not asking. I am offering." He sat back on his heels, dirt streaking his forearms. "I do not like the thought of you traveling that far alone, standing up in court with no one on your side. Let me come with you." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her chest ache. "Why? Why do you keep helping me?" Lucas was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Because the thought of anything bad happening to you makes me want to punch holes through walls. Because you have gotten under my skin, Marianne, and I cannot seem to shake you loose. Because when I picture my future now, you are in it, and that terrifies me." Marianne's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Lucas, I know I have no right," he continued, the words coming faster now. "I know you are not looking for another man after what happened. I know I am just a ranch hand with more dreams than money, but I cannot keep pretending that I am here out of simple neighborly kindness. I am here because I cannot stand to be anywhere else." She dropped the seed packet and closed the distance between them in 2 steps. Her hands found his face and she felt him go very still. "You terrify me too," she whispered. "I thought I was being practical with Richard Thornberry, choosing companionship and help over foolish romantic notions. But this, what I feel when I look at you, this is not practical at all. This is the kind of feeling that could destroy me if I let it." "Or save you," Lucas said, and then he was kissing her, and Marianne discovered that she had never really been kissed before. Richard Thornberry's letters had been full of empty poetry. But this, Lucas's mouth on hers, his hands cradling her face with such tenderness. This was real poetry, the kind written in breath and heartbeat, and the perfect fit of 2 people finally admitting what had been building between them all along. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I do not want to leave," he said hoarsely. "I do not want my own land if it means going somewhere without you." "Then do not go." Marianne's voice shook. "Stay here. We will make this work together. You said this land has potential. Help me realize it. I do not want to just be your ranch hand, Marianne. I do not want you to be my ranch hand." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I want you to be my partner, my husband if you will have me. Not because I need someone to help run the ranch, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it now. Because you make me laugh. Because you see me, really see me, in a way no one else ever has. Because I love you, Lucas Dalton, and I think I have since the day you showed up and refused to let me drown." His eyes were suspiciously bright as he kissed her again, softer this time, sweeter. "I love you too," he said against her lips. "God help me, I love you so much it aches." They sat in the dirt of the garden that evening as the sun set, making plans and promises, and Marianne felt the last pieces of her broken heart seal themselves back together, stronger than before. The trip to St. Louis, 2 months later, was long and exhausting, but Lucas never left her side. He held her hand during the train journey, helped her find a respectable boarding house near the courthouse, and sat in the gallery every day of the trial with his steady presence giving her courage. Facing Charles Webster in court was one of the hardest things Marianne had ever done. He was a small, nondescript man with cold eyes and a practiced smile. When she took the stand and recounted how he had taken her money, her hopes, her trust, she saw not a flicker of remorse in his expression. But she also saw the other victims in the courtroom, saw their tears and their anger and their relief that someone was finally holding him accountable. A young widow from Ohio who had sent him $500. A widower from Illinois who had been convinced his mail-order bride would arrive any day. An elderly woman from Missouri who had lost her life savings. When the jury returned with a guilty verdict, the courtroom erupted in applause and tears. Marianne felt Lucas's hand squeeze hers, and she squeezed back, feeling lighter than she had in months. They were married in Dodge City 2 weeks after returning from St. Louis, in a simple ceremony at the small church on the edge of town. Marianne wore her mother's cream-colored dress, carefully mended and altered. Lucas wore his best suit and looked so handsome it made her breath catch. There were only a handful of guests, mostly neighboring ranchers and a few friends from town, but it was perfect. Benjamin Cross, Lucas's former boss, attended and clapped him on the back after the ceremony. "You are a good man, Lucas Dalton. I hate to lose my best ranch hand, but I am glad to see you finally get something of your own. Thank you, Benjamin, for everything you taught me." "Just promise me one thing," Cross said, his eyes twinkling. "When you make this spread successful, and I know you will sell me your extra cattle at a fair price. You have my word." That night, alone together for the first time as husband and wife, Lucas carried Marianne over the threshold of the ranch house that was now truly theirs. He set her down gently in the main room, which she had cleaned and decorated with wildflowers for the occasion. "Welcome home, Mrs. Dalton," he said softly. "Welcome home, Mr. Dalton," she replied and kissed him. They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other with hands and mouths and whispered words. Marianne had expected to feel nervous, but with Lucas, everything felt natural, right? He was patient and gentle and utterly focused on her pleasure, and when they finally came together completely, she felt tears slip down her temples. "Did I hurt you?" Lucas asked immediately, his voice tight with concern. "No," she whispered. "No, I am just happy, so impossibly happy." He kissed her tears away and held her close, and they fell asleep tangled together, content. The months that followed were filled with hard work and simple joys. Lucas continued to improve the ranch, expanding the herd with money they saved carefully. Marianne learned more about ranching every day, becoming a true partner in every sense. They worked dawn to dusk, fell into bed exhausted every night, and woke each morning eager to do it all again. In the spring of 1883, Marianne discovered she was pregnant. She told Lucas one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, the same porch where he had first offered to help her what felt like a lifetime ago. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply. Lucas went very still. Then he turned to her with wonder written across his face. "Truly." "Truly." He pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I am going to be a father," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" she asked, even though she could feel his joy radiating through every line of his body. "Happy does not begin to cover it, Marianne. I feel like I am going to burst." Their son was born on a cold December morning, arriving quickly and with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. They named him James, after Marianne's father, and he had Lucas's gray eyes and Marianne's dark hair. Lucas held his son for the first time with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face, and Marianne fell in love with him all over again. As James grew, the ranch grew with him. They expanded to 50 acres, buying up the parcels on either side as they became available. The herd increased to over 100 head. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, giving Lucas and Marianne more time to focus on their family. 2 years after James was born, they welcomed a daughter they named Clara. She was tiny and fierce, with her mother's stubborn streak and her father's quiet determination. Lucas doted on both children equally, teaching James to ride almost as soon as he could walk, singing Clara to sleep every night with old Tennessee lullabies. One evening in the summer of 1888, Marianne stood on the porch and surveyed their land. The house had been expanded and repaired, painted a cheerful yellow that gleamed in the setting sun. The barn was sturdy and straight. The fences were strong. Healthy cattle grazed across rolling pastures. In the yard, Lucas was teaching 6-year-old James how to throw a rope, while 3-year-old Clara danced around them, laughing. Benjamin Cross rode up the drive, and Lucas handed the rope to James before walking over to greet his old friend and mentor. Marianne joined them, wiping her hands on her apron. "Beautiful evening," Cross said, dismounting. "Beautiful family you have got here, Lucas. Thank you, I am a fortunate man. More than fortunate, smart. You saw potential where others saw a failing enterprise, and you made something remarkable." Cross pulled an envelope from his jacket, "which is why I wanted to bring you this personally." Lucas opened the envelope and his eyes widened. "Benjamin, this is payment for the 50 head you sold me last month. Fair price as promised. But there is a bonus in there too. Call it gratitude for all those years you worked for me, teaching my hands what you learned, helping Cross Creek become what it is today." "I cannot accept this," Lucas said, trying to hand the envelope back. "You can and you will. You earned it, Lucas. You and your remarkable wife here." Cross tipped his hat to Marianne. "You took a broken-down property and turned it into one of the most productive small ranches in this part of Kansas. You should be proud." After Cross left, Lucas and Marianne stood together watching their children play. Lucas wrapped his arm around her waist and pulled her close. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked quietly. "When you showed up and I was standing in the yard looking like my world had ended?" "Every day," Lucas said. "I think about how close I came to riding past, minding my own business. I think about what I would have missed if I had." "I was so angry," Marianne admitted. "So hurt and humiliated. I thought Richard Thornberry taking my money was the worst thing that could happen to me. And now," she turned in his arms to face him fully, "now I think it was the best thing, because it brought me you. If he had shown up, if I had married him out of desperation and practicality, I never would have known what real love feels like. I never would have known what it means to be true partners with someone. I never would have had this life." Lucas cupped her face in his hands. "I rode onto this property planning to help a neighbor and ride away again. I never expected to find home. But that is what you gave me, Marianne. Not just land or a ranch, but an actual home. You and James and Clara, you are everything I never knew I needed. We are lucky," she whispered. "We are blessed," he corrected, and kissed her as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. James came running up then, rope tangled around his ankles, and Clara was not far behind, demanding a turn. Lucas scooped them both up, one in each arm, and carried them inside for supper. Marianne followed, pausing in the doorway to look back one last time at the land that had almost defeated her, the land that had become her salvation. She thought about the foolish young woman who had sent money to a stranger, who had believed pretty words and empty promises. That woman seemed like someone else now, someone from a different lifetime. The woman she had become was stronger, wiser, more capable. But she was also softer in the ways that mattered. Her heart opened and expanded by genuine love. Inside, the house was warm and bright with lamplight. Lucas was already at the stove, teaching James how to check if the beans were ready while Clara set the table with intense concentration. It was such an ordinary scene, domestic and simple, but to Marianne it was everything. After supper, after the children were tucked into their beds and the dishes were washed and put away, Lucas and Marianne sat together on the porch as they did most evenings. The night was clear and cool, the stars brilliant overhead. "I have been thinking," Lucas said, breaking the comfortable silence, "about expanding the vegetable garden next spring. We could sell produce in town, diversify our income." "That is a good idea. Clara would love to help with that. And I want to teach James more about the business side of ranching. He is young, but he is smart. The more he learns now, the better prepared he will be when he is older." Marianne smiled. "Already planning for his future. Our future," Lucas corrected. "This ranch, everything we have built, it is not just for us. It is for them, for whatever family they might have someday. I want to make sure we leave them something solid, something that will last." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You are a good father, Lucas Dalton. A good husband. A good man. I try to be worthy of what I have been given." They sat in silence for a while longer, listening to the night sounds, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through grass. Marianne thought about all the turns her life had taken, the tragedies and triumphs, the moment of devastating loss that had somehow led her to this moment of profound contentment. "You have any regrets?" she asked suddenly. Lucas considered the question seriously. I regret that my mother did not live to see this, to meet you and the children. I think she would have loved you. Beyond that, no. Every choice I made, good or bad, led me here. I would not change any of it. Not even the times you had to work yourself to exhaustion, especially not those times. They taught me what I was capable of. He kissed the top of her head. What about you? Any regrets? Marianne thought about Richard Thornberry, about the money she had lost, about how foolish and desperate she had felt. No, she said finally, meaning it completely. No regrets, just gratitude. The years continued to pass in a steady rhythm of seasons and growth. The ranch prospered beyond their initial hopes. James grew into a serious, thoughtful young man with his father's work ethic and his mother's fierce determination. Clara became a whirlwind of energy and laughter, fearless on horseback and sharp as a tack when it came to the ranch accounts. In 1892, they welcomed another son, Thomas, whose arrival was unexpected but deeply welcomed. Lucas, now 41 and graying at the temples, was just as devoted to this late surprise as he had been to their first two children. In 1895, when James was 17, he asked his parents if he could attend agricultural college in Manhattan, Kansas. It was a hard decision, sending their eldest away, but Lucas and Marianne both knew it was the right choice. James returned 2 years later with new knowledge and ideas that helped modernize their operation even further. Clara showed no interest in leaving the ranch. She married a good man named David Fletcher in 1898, a neighboring rancher's son who respected her independence and her attachment to the land. They built a house on the eastern section of the property, and Clara continued to work alongside her parents and brother, now joined by her husband. Thomas, the unexpected blessing, grew up with a gentleness that contrasted with his siblings' intensity. He loved the animals more than the business side of ranching, and spent hours caring for injured birds and orphaned calves. Lucas built him a small workshop where Thomas could craft things with his hands, and it was there that he was happiest. On a summer evening in 1899, Marianne and Lucas sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. They were older now, their hands weathered and their faces lined, but the love between them had only deepened with time. "You remember the first time we sat here together?" Marianne asked. "When you told me about your mother, about why you wanted to help." "I remember everything about those early days," Lucas said. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, even when you were covered in dust and heartbreak. I remember thinking you were either a saint or a fool for offering to help me. I was neither. I was just a man who recognized something worth fighting for when he saw it." He took her hand, threading their fingers together as naturally as breathing. "Best decision I ever made, riding over here that morning. Best thing that ever happened to me, Richard Thornberry stealing my money," Marianne said with a laugh. "I should write him a thank you note. He is still in prison, last I heard." "Good, let him stay there." She squeezed Lucas's hand. "I got everything he stole from me back 1,000-fold. I got a real partner, a real marriage, a real life. He did me a favor in the end." They watched the sun set over their land, over the legacy they had built together through determination and love and unwavering partnership. 3 children, dozens of employees over the years, hundreds of cattle, thousands of memories. A life neither of them could have imagined that desperate spring day in 1882. "I love you, Marianne Dalton," Lucas said softly. "Every day I wake up grateful that you let me stay." "I love you too, Lucas Dalton," she replied. "Every day I wake up grateful that you never asked for anything in return and then gave me everything anyway." As the stars began to emerge overhead, they remained on the porch, 2 people who had found each other in the aftermath of betrayal and built something beautiful from the wreckage. The ranch stretched out before them in the gathering darkness, solid and thriving, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they worked together, when they loved without reservation, when they chose each other every single day. Inside the house, they could hear Clara and David laughing, James talking with Thomas about plans for the new barn, the sounds of family and home and belonging. Outside, the cattle were settling for the night, the horses nickering softly in the stable, the land itself seeming to breathe contentment. Marianne leaned against Lucas's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, and they sat together as the night deepened around them. They had weathered storms and droughts, hard winters and uncertain markets, all the challenges that came with building a life on the Kansas prairie. But they had weathered them together, and that had made all the difference. The mail-order groom had taken her money and vanished, leaving her destitute and desperate. But the cowboy had helped her and asked for nothing in return, and in doing so, had given her absolutely everything. A home. A family. A love story for the ages. A happily ever after that was not found in pretty letters and empty promises, but in hard work and genuine partnership, and the steady, enduring devotion of two people who had chosen each other freely and loved each other completely. And as the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, as the land settled into its nightly rest, as the life they had built together breathed and thrived around them, Marianne knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single moment of her journey. Every heartbreak had led her here. Every loss had taught her what truly mattered, and every day with Lucas was a gift she never took for granted. They were no longer young, but they were together and they were home, and that was more than enough. That was everything.